Dun, dun, dun.
Hello, and welcome to episode 17 of Ask Lovecraft After Dark with a very special guest. We have DJ Sylvis. DJ Sylvis is a playwright, director, and producer, and one of my longest professional theatrical collaborators. DJ, welcome.
Hello, hello.
DJ and we started working back in 2008, very at the very tail end of 2008. I had some of y'all have heard a bit of the story when I was talking with Stephen Neer. But when I first arrived in Toronto, I could not find any theater crowd that would have me. I wasn't really doing a lot of auditioning. It was part of it as I was trying to get my feet and actually get work, housing, those things. So it took me about 2 years until finally I was working at a bookstore, and one of the clerks there took me aside and said, "Oh, hey, we had someone drop out, and this company I'm working with needs is looking for folks. Are you free? Are you interested?" I was like, Sure, yeah." And did I meet you like at a Tim Hortons? We had some
Yes,
very
that's
strange.
exactly where it was. It was like right at St. George.
Yes.
One right in front of St. George Station.
We had a very Canadian interaction. Yeah, we had ourselves a little who is this person? Do I want him saying my words? Kind of audition interview, and that was to portray King Kong in the last minutes in the life of King Kong. And then I would also go on to be a werewolf.
You were a werewolf, and you were the director in the director in the.
Not in that first run. That was still Tim.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
because I was looking back through things today and I had actually forgotten you were even in the other ones.
I did. I think we did a second iteration of it.
Yeah, and the first Monkey Sci-Fi Horror Theater Night,
and then when we did the Return of the Phoenix. So let's take a moment and tell the folks about Monkeyman Productions, about just what kind of theater you put up in Toronto and have been putting up in Toronto for now a good solid decade.
Sure. So yeah, Monkeyman Productions is our somewhat still alive theater company known as Toronto's geekiest theater company. We started in 2008 after meeting the other who would become the other founding members, Marty, Tim, and Brad, in Alumni's New Ideas Festival, doing my play Godzilla on Sundays. Godzilla on Sundays is a dorky little two-hander about two guys obsessed with Godzilla movies. And so we did this production. It was interesting. I compressed a two-hour play into 45 minutes, and we did it for New Ideas. They tried to convince us to have little old ladies play the child parts, and did all sorts of typical alumni stuff, if you happen to know that company. But it was fun. It sort of spoke to all of our particularly geeky sensibilities, and we got together afterwards and said, it would be fun to keep doing stuff like this. And so we decided to found the company that fall. We did Theater of the Obsessed, which was the sort of overarching showcase that involved all these little pieces, King Kong, whatever the name of that werewolf piece was that I forget by this point.
Sheep in the Fold or Wolf in the Fold?
Which was sort of my ham-handed attempt at an Agatha Christie story.
Yeah.
And
it was. Folks need to understand. So this evening again. This is my first time doing theater in Toronto, and the plays I'm doing are the first. I'm standing on a step ladder with a homemade gorilla mask and a black turtleneck. While we've got the fighter pilot also in this kind of Greek style mask and a bomber jacket, and then our friend Charlene as the heroine, and they sort of really elaborate, again, sort of Greek kind of classical Greek style mask, but with the blonde hair and pink cheek. I don't know. It was pretty fantastic.
It was a very sort of Greek inspired piece. That was the very stylized way that I wrote it too. So
everything was being declaimed outwards, and we were sort of going kind of round robin and saying our lines and narrating what was happening. And I had to fall off a ladder without actually falling off a ladder, which involved making use of my non-existent thigh muscles. But Sheep in the Fold was sadly I had no lines in that. Because that was an incredibly well-written play. Like it was like a short, like kind of just taking like a full-length Agatha Christie, piece and just squishing it down to like 15 minutes. But you had everything. You had menacing vicars. You had the evil inspector who turns out to be the bad guy all along, or is he? We have our wonderful sort of collapsing dowager. And yeah, it ran through all these kind of parlor mystery tropes, and then surprise werewolf attack. And that was my specialty, being a very still pair of shoes, and then like coming out and snarling, but there being a bit too much light on.
And I was going to say that was always the challenge, was that Marty couldn't quite see in the booth where you were at, and so the lights just a little too long.
That's why I just had to get closer and closer and slower and slower. Well, also, okay, let's talk about where this was being put on. This was like theater in someone's. It was like someone's apartment that had been sort of retrofitted into a theater space.
Yeah, it was like a loft space or something with a booth sort of shoehorned into the corner.
Oh, well, not even a corner. Like there was a weird, you had to go up like a ladder and be in this really rickety, dangerous sort of crawl space. And this was not the only show I did here in this space.
Oh, that's right, because you did the Golem there too, right?
I think we also did Godwrath in this spot, and then the whole thing got stopped because it was terrible. Like you would go up, it was so poorly labeled. I walked into someone's apartment because you were just in there were sort of office spaces below, but then it was just like housing. And so I remember just walking to a house and be like, oh, this isn't right. Someone yelling at me. And yeah, so that was insane. And then we were being paired with this play that was a one-man show that was longer than I think both of our shows combined.
Oh goodness, yes.
Which was like a guy making an aluminum foil hat and explaining how the aliens were coming for him. It was an introduction. It was quite the introduction. But it was it definitely set the tone. And for the next, because I stayed in Toronto for about 7 years and really did theater for I'd say 5 or 6 of those years. And while I did work with Alumni, and while I did I went out to Runnymede for some stuff, Monkeyman became my theatrical home. I would do at least one play a year with Monkeyman. I would act. I directed once. I produced maybe once. And folks who were here for Steven's show, this is how Ask Lovecraft really got its inception. Because when Stephen Neer wrote Monsters Invisible and was looking for a place to put it up, Monkeyman decided to do it.
Doing the Banana Festival, which was the Simian Showcase sort of prototype.
Yeah, and that's where I met Laura Rold, and that's really what kicked it into gear. And so Monkeyman remained a very special part of my time in Toronto. I did more Lovecraft. We did.
I was going to say it. We did one of your first appearances live as Lovecraft.
We did the Fringe Festival. That's right, the Fringe Festival. We did the which was when we DJ to set up our live show, because we weren't sure kind of what we wanted to do. We got the slot. Yeah, we got the Fringe slot. And we were like, okay, we've got this Lovecraft thing. We can probably by this point I've done 300 episodes. We can draw stuff from that and cobble together some sort of live show. But we're like, do we want it to be scripted, or do we want it to be mostly improvised? Because I had done live just Q&As at the cons. But those were completely unscripted. Those were just me going up on stage, being like, hello, I'm Howard Phillips Lovecraft. Who has a question? You, yes. For this, we couldn't assume anyone had any idea who Lovecraft was. And so we needed to essentially have a little intro to Lovecraft. DJ, you want to tell these poor people what you did to prepare? for this?
Absolutely. So, um, and I mean, I kind of wanted to feel like I had some part in the creative process too, because you'd been doing it for so long and you already had like the character established and this like sort of backstory established. I wanted,
but not even that long, really, just a year, I think.
Well, there were 300 episodes by then, so
yeah, it's one a week, or it's 3 a week. That adds up. Okay, so I guess it would have been about 2 years.
Yeah. So I sat down and I watched every extant episode up to that date, which probably took me the better part of like my free time for 2 or 3 weeks.
Thank you.
But no, so it was noting, and I think I was going through my Google Drive and I still have the spreadsheet I made at the time with notes on, okay, this episode would work, this episode wouldn't work. Maybe we could pull something from this one and mix it with something else. And then we sat down and sort of took those notes and decided what was worth keeping and what wasn't.
Oh, and I remember your partner sat down and like annotated, because I sort of took this all and like and ran with it and like, you know, monologue for like half an hour. And I don't know if she was there like handwriting it or if you'd recorded it. Like, I think maybe we recorded it.
Yeah, I think we recorded it.
And she went back and listened to it. And so I had to like transcribe my ramblings. Like a very depressing court reporter. So this was an involved process, but I mean, the end result is we had this great show, and I still essentially use it when I do live shows for specifically with audiences who don't know Lovecraft, you know. So when I've done the
because we worked, I mean, that was one of the things we worked hard at, to try to sort of make a balance of, okay, this is still going to be interesting. People who do already have all the backstory, but it's going to give people enough of a like intro who don't know it, and it sort of hit on some of the literary stuff, but still gave them like some pop culture and some really funny bits, and still gave you room at like in like the back end to do some like question and answer and play it loose and fast. So,
well, it was so fun doing the Fringe show because people, you know, we'd start off with like a handful of people because we were outside. The way we were in the Fringe tent, and so with the Fringe Festival, you know, they have all the theater spaces booked with big shows, and then they have this kind of alley space with vendors and with like just people having beer and usually essentially sort of hanging out, meeting people before they go to these other shows. But
sometimes they had live music next to us while we're trying to work.
Yes, there is that. And but they had little theater spaces, and you could bring out chairs and like, you know, do sort of open air theater. So we would set up, and I would, you know, get out, and like maybe like 6 friends would come to it, but we would always end with more of a crowd because people saw this weird looking like street preacher dude all in black, like gesticulating really excitedly. And yeah, we always managed to draw a crowd to it, which was heartening. You always want to end with more people than you start off with, and not the other way around.
Yeah, no, it worked really well, and I felt like it was a really successful production for us, like as a company too. We haven't actually managed to break into the actual Toronto Fringe yet. We've applied to the lottery several times and not gotten in, so it was sort of our chance to get to know them too. And we actually, a lot of our audience wound up being like people working for the Fringe who were hanging around there and saw us drawing people in and were just curious as to what we were doing. So,
well, it was a ton of fun. And it was, it was very strange. It was certainly better than when we then recreated it for the TIFF.
Yeah.
The International Film Festival, which, you know, we were like, oh, like we got invited. I think a handful of us who had done these like tent shows were invited to come.
Just wanted a few people to like fill a space.
But like that was literally doing theater in like a border guard booth.
For people who didn't really care about you.
People who were like, I have to go see a German movie. I guess I'll come into your weird murder box with you.
Yes.
Because it wasn't like the other show had been a tent, right? It was outdoors. People could see and like stop and like listen for a bit. Like this, you had to go into this tiny like little booth. And so we were just wondering, be like, who wants to come into the murder booth with me? Anyone want to come see me? Anyone here like Lovecraft want to be in my murder booth? Sadly, what we should have done is if Guillermo del Toro had been there that year, you know, we should have tried to like wrangle him. but yeah, this was, I mean, this is the kind of theater we did. We did theater in the back of bars, in the basement of libraries, and the just any sort of strange space we could find.
Sort of strange role I could write for you.
That's right.
You were my
Yeah,
Kong,
yeah.
you were my God. You were my Rod Serling. You were every face. You were my man of 1,000 faces.
And well, and it was just heartening. It was really nice to have a kind of theatrical home, a base, a place where I could go to do a really sort of crappy but high budget, period drama, and then come back to Monkeyman and get to be this sort of out of time, out of space, outer limits kind of narrator, or be a sort of a hapless Star Trek director. There was so much play and so much ability to I don't know, we got along, and we had, like any family, there was drama and back and forth and bickering and all that good energy. But when it was really hard, when I had to leave, one of the hardest things about leaving Toronto was knowing that I was most likely not going to find a theater family like this again. One that, like, the relationship with which I developed very organically, that, we had spent time, we had just worked and played and drank and gamed, and you all were at my Christmas party where the dog ate an entire chocolate cake.
I was telling that story just the other day.
It's hard to recreate those kind of moments, and capture that kind of fire and energy, which is why I'm very excited that I get to play with y'all again. And part of why we had DJ on tonight is that we just launched our new serial sci-fi podcast project, Moonbase Theta Out.
But I can kind of sort of bridge there. There is the gap of, what is it, like 2 years or 3 years since you left, and we unfortunately had sort of like a downturn with the company as well. A few other people sort of drifted away and had their own stuff they needed to focus on. We had a production that had to be set by the wayside after we had rented space, and sort of took a financial downturn, and we went on hiatus for a couple of years. And trying to come back, we discovered that our coffers are too low to rent spaces and produce theater, and that was how we wound up going into podcasts to start with. It was just sort of the cheaper option.
Well, and you guys had planned to do a sort of a bigger show before this one, but it's launching later. Isn't that correct?
Yeah. Like the first idea that I pitched, and we're still developing it, is sort of a paranormal adventure thing. It's called Whimsy and Whiffle's World of Wonders. My elevator pitch for it has always been, what if Ripley's Believe It or Not were about two middle-aged lesbians and a pot-bellied pig?
Okay.
And so it's sort of like a paranormal relationship, like some sort of more positive, happy adventure series with Bigfoot and giant beavers and ghosts in it. So yeah, it's been fun to write so far, and I've been developing it for like a year and a half, 2 years now. And it was like originally the first podcast projects we had planned, but then it turns out that the larger your idea, the larger it still takes to put it together, whether it's theater or podcast or what have you. So developing the scripts took longer. Like figuring out production aspects is taking longer. Casting took quite a while. One of the things we were really dedicated to is trying to cast like non-white for at least one of the leads, and so it was important that we do that. And so focusing on that meant that we needed to take more time and more care in like our casting process. And we're actually hoping, fingers crossed, that we can start recording that beginning of next year. But the longer that was taking, the more I was like, but I want to do something now. And I was like, but while all of this stuff is sort of dragging on and I'm waiting to be able to like schedule people and figuring out calendars for everyone for that project, I thought, well, I'll just fool around with other stuff. And this idea sort of came out of the ether, and I was like, okay, I can write a one-person thing. I think I was sort of my original impetuous was like, okay, I'll do my Night Vale and get Lehman to sort of join in, and we'll like make something big, and I mean, like little but like powerful, and just sort of shove that out there and learn about the process while we're developing the bigger piece anyway. And I'm actually really happy with how it sort of came together out of almost nothing.
And what was the inspiration for doing moon-based data, for taking, you going from sort of Ripley and lesbians and beavers and all that jazz, and going into the very sort of sterile, very claustrophobic world of this moon base that's in shutdown?
I think one of the things I'm really working hard to do, well, with my work more in general, sort of in the light of the current political and cultural climate, and with Women's Wiffle in particular, is trying to do like some more positive stuff, more like inspirational kind of stories. And I think this was sort of a reaction to spending too much time writing that sort of stuff. That I was like, okay, I still have to do something a little bit dystopian, something that's a little bit more like the sort of things I used to write. But it actually, oddly enough, I think came out of the title more than anything else. The title just sort of struck me. I was playing around with, there was a while back that I did a project, like writing a piece every week for a year project called Monkey Monster or Spaceman, which was sort of like inspired by like Jonathan Colton's Song a Week thing and stuff like that, where I posted a new piece of fiction every week. And one of them, and like actually a couple of them were like moon-based things. And so it was just something that stuck in my head. And so I'm sure that the idea of telling another moon-based story came from that, but I really just had the title and I was like, okay, moon-based theta out. So obviously there have been other moon bases because theta is not the first letter in the Greek alphabet. Moon out kind of implies that there's sort of a downturn of some sort coming. And I came up with the idea that, okay, this is going to be a limited series and there's going to be counting down to decommissioning this base.
Well, and when you approached me about it, I was really tickled because when I worked for Chapters, the Canadian big chain bookstore, there would be sort of, kind of low, quiet times. And I would write little bits of like kind of flash fiction on just scrap paper because we had so much just random scrap paper. And I would just write the stuff and just, amuse my coworkers with it when I wasn't doing Christopher Walken theater. And one of my like recurring story that I kept going back to was called "Fuck the Moon," and the premise of this was some sort of sad, low level engineer stuck on the moon, essentially like pushing a button and managing widgets. And these were his mandated, psychological therapy journal entries. That were just him ranting about how it sucks to be on the moon. So yeah, it was a very interesting piece of synergy. I don't think I ever told you about them. I mean, I think it was like me and two cashiers ever saw these strips of paper before they wound up going into recycle. So that was that just sort of meant, okay, all right, obviously we're on a wavelength like years apart, which, matches the tone of the show. And yeah, this was an interesting, very, very different piece for me to kind of work on. I've done now a few audiobooks. I've done like sort of short, pseudo podcast and podcastle style, like short fiction. But this was this very different, serialized 20 distinct episodes that had a rhythm, and there was, the format of it was, kind of similar, this communications officer, delivering these kind of status reports. And I want to talk about that, by the way. And so, they were each had a very different level of energy, a level of emotion that I had to bring to it. You were responding to different things, and it was a difficult process for me. Compared to just kind of going down and like doing a story, reading like kind of a, an hour or 2 hour long thing. For some reason, like these sort of short, very like intense, but kind of bursts, I found very challenging, but very exciting to wrestle with as an actor. I will say, I was, I was editing, and and every time I screw up, I have to go back and make note of it and edit it out. The thing that made me have to edit more than anything else was the fact that DJ doesn't like the way I pronounce data. I don't know why. I don't know if it's a Southern thing. I don't know what's going on. But I would, be talking about blah, 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 blah. And then the data came in, sigh, do my little like clapping to indicate that's where the break is. And then be like, where the data is. And of course, every single time I'm imagining the Polanski data conversation. So that's running through my head again and again and again and again. So thank you for that, DJ.
I honestly think that's probably part of it too, is that in my head, data is a character.
It's a word.
And I can't remove myself from that.
But yeah, so by this point, by the point of this recording, how many episodes are out? Are we at 3 or 4 at this point?
First 3 are out. The fourth one we'll go into like regular weekly release next Monday, the 26th. So yeah, we launched last week, and I wanted to it was in part because they're short episodes, because they're like 5-minute episodes, and in part because I wanted people to start seeing that there is a little bit of an arc involved. We released the first 3 at once, and then we're going to go to weekly release starting next week, which I think will take us to episode 20 on March 16th, I think, something like that, somewhere mid-March. So the 20-week progression will end around there.
But if you are impatient, you can jump the queue.
Yeah. Yes, one of the things we tried to do at the same time, because again, there's not really, unless you're like My Favorite Murder and have like millions of listeners hanging on your every word, it's really kind of hard to monetize podcasts, particularly dramatic podcasts. So we started a Patreon at the same time. And one of our little sort of perks is that for our Patreon supporters at like the $5 a month level and up, they have access to the entire 20 episode arc from like day one.
I don't want to be that guy, but it's Patreon.
Okay, that's fair. You say Patreon, I say Patreon.
I say data, and then I have to edit it out again.
But yeah, so like literally, you could join for a month and then cancel and have paid $5 to essentially get the entire run ahead of time. But I was talking to you beforehand and saying that it's sort of a little vanity thing for me too, because I feel like there's so much really cool stuff that happens near the end, and I don't want to have to wait until like March to get that reaction from everyone. So.
I appreciate that. I like to have that instant response. Well, it's also like when I set up stuff like that's coming out, months down the line, and then it does release, and people are like, "Oh, I heard the thing was really good." I'm like, "What? What happened? Oh, wow. Okay, thank you. Yes, I completely forgot I worked on that."
Well, and because honestly, like I love the first few episodes too. There's stuff there that I really enjoy. The tardigrade jokes are fun, but every time that somebody says, "Oh, I really enjoyed it," I'm like, my first response is, "Wait until you hear the last episodes," because there are so many places we go, and like I was surprised. Like, I mean, well, you've seen the scripts through development. Like, there's stuff that happens in the last few episodes that I had no idea was going to go at the beginning. It just sort of like naturally came out of us, like refining them and progressing with the character.
Well, and that was the challenge, because I'm acting with myself. I'm responding to stuff that's happening off camera, very literally. But having to respond, very viscerally. Like I had to make these other characters come alive just through my recounting and through my narration. And that was interesting. I don't think I've ever done anything quite like that. I've done, again, audiobooks and things where I'm playing different characters and bouncing back and forth and figuring out which character is going to get the Patrick Warburton voice, which one's going to be Paul Rand. But they're usually the same character. But
yeah, I mean, that was like one of the challenges of creating it that way, was that a lot of the way, and I mean, a lot of this is going to come out in subsequent episodes, but a lot of your impression of the other active members of the crew right now, you're just getting Roger's opinion of them. You don't know if this is accurate. I mean, he's a very unreliable narrator. in some senses at least.
Well, and that is what I enjoyed, because he's, nominally very sympathetic, and I think you feel for him being in this situation and being sort of isolated and trapped and not getting communication from his superiors. I think there's a tendency to feel that sort of sympathy, but he is the only source coming down, and I like how things kind of begin to fray a little bit. Because you do a very good job, and with just 5 minutes. I mean, again, these are like short episodes, but you pack in a lot. You pack in a lot of characterization. You pack in a lot of world building, without it being overboard, which I appreciate. Because I think there could be a lot of, as you well know, since the hydrogen wars of 2047, we here have, there's none of that. There's just, there's absolutely nothing. You sort of hint at kind of certain, technological innovations, but it doesn't, nothing is too far out, nothing is this is not a post-scarcity world. This is definitely a kind of a duct tape together, literally, future.
Yeah. Well, I feel like a lot of it was, and again, like I did think about that, and I didn't want to shove things in people's faces too much. I wanted to make subtle choices, but I think that where I did make choices, I was trying to just follow what I felt like was the logical extent. So, I mean, logical further steps, space travel is almost completely being taken over by private business at this point. Technological innovations and stuff are slowing down. There's not really a whole lot of big discoveries being made right now. And a lot of I don't want to give spoilers, so I have to be careful what I say here, but a lot of talking about what happens back on Earth to me is again natural extensions of what I think is happening politically, as far as economics versus actual caring about the wealth of the health of your people and things like that, and sort of being more concerned about grabbing up as much land as possible, because pretty soon the ocean's going to start swallowing it all. And just trying to follow those through lines to where it made sense, and just not worry about it too much beyond there. I don't talk at all about how they're surviving on the moon. I just sort of assume that it's happened, and what's really interesting is whether or not they get chocolate.
Well, that's always a vital part of anything. No, it feels much more like David Brin or Kim Stanley Robinson than it does Star Trek, or even there's the Alien, is kind of more more sort of advanced in a lot of ways. Was the research process like this, kind of going back to classic sci-fi that you enjoyed, or was it about kind of trying to create something whole, sort of from whole cloth?
Yeah, I think it was just sort of all those things are in the back of my head, but I wasn't specifically drawing on them consciously. I was doing a lot of research on what's actually possible, what it's on the far side of the moon, doing a lot of scientific research just to make sure that the stuff I was writing about radio telescopes made sense. But in the back of my head is stuff like the movie Moon, which is of course just a fantastic picture of that same sort of world. And of course, I have a lot of classic sci-fi in the back of my head. I have Moon is a Harsh Mistress and all that sort of thing in the back of my head. And but I don't think I was consciously trying to create anything like that. I think I just had come up with this character, and I was trying to create the world that made sense for him to tell his story.
Well, and I'm thinking about the science fiction that you wrote for the stage, when the one we've talked about is the kind of tongue-in-cheek parody of Star Trek, where it's kind of the making of a Star Trek movie. And that world is very just obviously, here's the analog for the Klingons, and we're literally going to play the Kirk fight music. But I was also remembering two really powerful plays that you did for the show where I did the kind of the narration. And one was based in kind of a near future where essentially Toronto has mandated power outages.
Yeah.
And again, it's just a very simple, very like kind of, near future, ecologically based, touching on sort of social issues and just intimate and simple. And then the other one was about two people on a spacecraft, again, like kind of hurtling towards disaster, but mostly being this kind of interpersonal thing.
Yeah, Chance, and that one's been like done a few other places as well, and that's actually one of my favorite little pieces. But yeah, it's a very sort of like not so much dystopian as this piece, but just sort of like a very like sort of downer at the end.
We did make a fantastic chair for that though.
Oh, for sure. But yeah, so like it is very much that would very much fit into the same world as Moonbase, as this podcast for sure. And yeah, I think all of my sci-fi has a sort of like classic damn the technological accuracy feel to it, but
that works. I appreciate it. Well, and
as much as I try to do research, like there's a point at which I don't care, and I'm free to
and you also didn't gobbledygook the whole thing up, right? Like I'm not spending a lot of time trying to like figure out how to pronounce triclinium crystals or stuff like that. You like helium-3. People assume it's on the moon, so let's just talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, again, like all I did like the minimum acceptable amount of research. Okay, that is possibly a reason why we would be like trying to like mine resources from the moon. So let's just call it that. And,
that's more research than I do for any of my projects.
But yeah, no, I think it works well, and I feel like well, it's just like certainly any of my stories and any of the stories I love best anyway. All of that stuff is just set dressing for what's important, which is the connections between people and the like struggles that they're going through. I mean, one of my favorite parts of every episode is like the little tag at the end where it's the little message back to his husband, which has nothing at all to do with the like ongoing storyline in most cases, but just sort of like I think gives you an idea of like the yearning he has for this to work out well in the end.
Well, and it ends everything on a really human note. He's been going through all this stuff, like kind of that's touching on politics or touching on like technical issues or interpersonal issues. And then you just ground it and it varies, it's not always the same. It's not always just the kind of this sort of one note repeating.
Yeah.
But I really made sure to like change tone of voice, like there's a difference between how you like talk directly to like an employer or someone you're kind of in a fight with. And then when you're trying to leave a message for someone and you just really need to hear back from them, and so finding that tone and finding like, okay, how do you transition from one to the other without it being so jarring?
Yeah.
I think I made work. I guess we'll find out.
Speaking as the person who sometimes artificially extended your pauses, that was kind of interesting too. Like I had never considered until I started actually like mixing these episodes how much of a difference that could make. Like I'm used to being the playwright standing back behind the curtain being like, damn it, why didn't they say that line right? Damn it, why couldn't they take that pause for just a second longer? And now I can change those things.
Precisely. Well, and the way the script was written, there were these kind of breaks in it, and I was like, well, like I don't know how long he wants this, so he can figure it out.
Yeah, that made sense. That's kind of interesting too. Do you want to talk about when we first started trading the scripts back and forth? Like I was just used to sort of the same thing I do for plays, which is to mark the pauses and mark any like important direction, but not worry too much about emotion. And you really kind of felt like you needed more direction as far as that went.
Well, I think because there was no real director and there was not a whole lot of rehearsal to like work things out, I wanted to make sure I had as much of your intent going into the script. And because, it's very short, and when there are changes in sort of emotion and feeling, like it's easy to miss it if like the context doesn't click with me, I'm just sort of going through and reading. So it was nice to have like little cues, just to not really line readings, but just, ways to be like, okay, this is sort of where he's at right now for this. Essentially, in some ways to be as if there's another character there I can respond to.
Yeah.
Because I don't have that, I don't have any of that feedback. It's literally just me in front of a microphone and a laptop screen. So trying to get an idea of what the back and forth and play of that is, so that I'm, I mean, one thing I could have done was just taken like 18 takes
Well, yeah.
of, in different fields and different, like, the helium-3 is really low. The helium-3 is really low. The helium-3 is really low. I wanted to give you an opportunity to sort of say, like, what do you feel? And again, because you're not physically here, to be like, Lehman, okay, can we go back? Like, there, keep in mind this, that, and the other. The kind of the back and forth communication we were having, just over Messenger, limited kind of what I could do. And I didn't want to have to kind of keep having to go back and do retakes, because I like being able to do the full.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I felt bad the few times I did ask you to do alternate takes, because I was like, I know how hard it is for you to like squeeze in that time as it is.
When the children let me. Well, and that was fine, because going back in and getting those little like lines here and there, I think you only made me completely redo something once. And I'm more than fine with it, because I'm as an actor, I'm an actor who craves a dictator of a director to tell me what to do. I've never been like, well, this is how I feel. I like the times I get into conflict with directors is when they can't tell me what they want, and they'll be like, well, just go with what you want, and then I do what I want, and they tell me that's wrong, and I'm like, well, then just tell like, if you had told me, then. So that's yeah, so that was having to direct myself, which I'm never comfortable with. Because again, what I do with Lovecraft is so different, like, it's such this bizarre, like, pseudo improv, kind of written, kind of just like off the top of my pants. And off the top of my pants, I think that's the expression.
Where you were going there.
And yeah, I mean, this is very, very, very different from that. Just, I mean, and this is my first time going to a script like this in a while. I've done a little bit of work with students with their film classes and their film exercises, but this, this level of not quite narration, not dialogue, but sort of dialogue, like a kind of a one-sided dialogue, and it gets later on. It gets interesting when you get a bit more of that kind of unspoken back and forth. And that was a lot of fun to kind of like imagine just that, who is being spoken to, and how that kind of like impacts what our little communications officer is feeling. That was a lot of fun, and like I said, a real challenge. I'm really excited to see what folks take from it, whether folks enjoy it, or whether folks are like, stick to just making weird Cthulhu jokes.
Well, I was happy with it, and I honestly was really, really pleased with what you brought to the table for this one.
Well, thank you.
Not to butter you up on your own show or anything, man.
Oh, I'll take any and all buttering. So we've done this. This is now in the can, ready to start kind of dripping out for the masses to enjoy. We've got the next. You're hoping to start work on the next show in the new year. What can folks kind of, I don't know, but what can folks prepare to get excited for that?
Well, we'll probably start like talking more about it at that point when we start doing recording and we have a better idea of where our schedule is going to be like. We're hoping that that'll go live in the spring, and I don't know. Like, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how this like gets received too. I've already been thinking about, we really paint, I mean, again, without doing any spoilers, we really sort of paint him in a corner by the end of the 20 episodes. But I've like sort of like, when I'm laying in bed at night, I'll sort of poke at it with my head and be like, could we do another season? Where would this go after this? So who knows?
Mars.
Silly boy, Mars needs women.
Oh, well. Well, thank you so much, DJ. This has been an absolute blast. Like I said, you have been such an amazing part of my theatrical life, my creative life, for now over a decade. It's hard to put that into words, really. But I mean, when I look back over some of the work I've done on stage that I'm really proud of, that I really cherish, it's been with Monkeyman. and folks can go to monkeymanproduction.com, see some of the like stills and stuff that we've worked on, see a lot of blog posts where we talk about what we did. It was unlike anything else that was out there. It was lo-fi and just full of heart and full of love and full of strangeness. And I think that is theater at its best, when it's saying something that's important, but also being able to have a really good time. I mean, the kind of shows that I got to see, let alone be a part of, were really powerful. And I hope that as Monkeyman begins to look into new media, new forays, that same energy, that same drive can be present, because it's special and it's unique and it deserves a chance to flourish.
Yeah, it's really been exciting. I mean, when we started doing this stuff in 2008, there wasn't really a whole lot of like geek-focused theater, where there wasn't really a whole lot of genre theater out there. Now it seems like it's been flourishing. There are groups all over the place. There's stuff in San Francisco. There's stuff in Chicago. There's stuff in New York. There's stuff all over in Toronto. Like there are like D&D like improv shows and everything. It's been really great to see, and I'm excited to see if we can sort of like carve out our own sort of space in podcasts as well, where there's a lot of great podcasting going on. I don't know if there's a lot of like great like genre dramatic stuff out there yet, and so I'd like to see what we can do.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for coming on. If folks want to find out about what's happening with Monkeyman Productions or about your work, where should they go?
The easiest thing is just to go to monkeymanproductions.com. We've got like the main page for Moonbase Data out there. Of course, any of your podcast apps, you can find it there as well. But there's subscription information on there. There's going to be like preview information for the other podcast when we get closer. And assuming we start doing theater again at some point in the future, that'll be the best spot as well.
Fantastic. Folks can, of course, support Moonbase Data and future productions by going to patreon.com/monkeymanproductions. If folks have enjoyed this program, you can be a part of all the Ask Lovecraft live shows. Get your comments and questions. We've had a lot of interesting conversations about Star Trek and which Star Trek characters would make the best companion for the Doctor. Do you have, DJ, do you have any opinions on that?
I think Dr. Bashir would make an excellent companion.
He would definitely be the horniest companion. Well, I think Garrick would be the one who'd be the most useful.
Garrick would definitely be excellent as well. See, Garrick could be the Doctor, and Bashir could be.
Ooh, a lot more genocide. But folks can, if folks want to be part of these live conversations, you can go to Facebook and join the Ask Lovecraft Appreciation Society. If you're interested in seeing the regular Ask Lovecraft show, you can just go to asklovecraft.com. You can follow my various goings-ons and live performances at LehmanKessler.com. And if you just want to see me screaming into the void, you can go over to Twitter, where I'm at Lehman Kessler. DJ, thank you so much for being on the show, and we look forward to seeing what our future work brings us.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Bye, everyone. Have a great week.